Thank you very much. It's good to be back on campus. It's always good to be on the UC Davis campus, and one of the great privileges I have is to represent this extraordinary institution and the students and professors and others who work here. Today we're going to talk about student loans. Whenever I meet a student, particularly a graduate student, the subject of loans comes up. What are you going to do about student loans? I can't do it, can't make it. Well, you finance your house, you go back and you can refinance your house, right? But you cannot refinance your student loan to a lower interest rate. And I've always wondered, what's wrong with the American policy that we would not allow students to refinance their student loans to take advantage of a lower interest rate? Well, if this piece of legislation becomes law, you'll be able to do so. And what interest rate would it be? Well, let's see. The federal government can borrow money at 10 years, a little less than 2% today. So why don't we refinance the student loans at 10% plus administrative costs, let's say 1%. So a 10-year loan at 2% plus 1% turns out to be 3.23% based upon today's 10-year bond that the government can borrow. Now the federal government owns just under $1 trillion of student debt. 40 million students across the United States, some in school, many that have graduated, are faced with an extraordinary task of paying off their student loans to the federal government. So if we were to take those 40 million students and allow them to refinance their student loans at 3% or a little more than 3%, what would be the effect? Well, first of all, the effect would be significant for the students. They would be able to have a much lower monthly rate. They'd be able to pay off their loans quicker, and they can get about life. Instead of having to pay off the loan and holding off on getting married, buying a house, even getting a job. It may be difficult to get a job if you have a significant amount of debt, which many students do. This idea is not particularly new. Senator Warren introduced a bill more than a year ago that would refinance undergraduate student loans. Turns out that about 40% of all the federal government loans are actually owned and owed by graduate students. And the graduate students are facing rates ranging from 4% up to 8%. This would allow them to refinance these loans and have a significant savings. There are other things in this bill that I think are important. First of all, if you're going to school and you happen to be a low-income student, which is probably the case here on campus, more than half of the students are, and they've taken out a loan, either as an undergraduate or a graduate, while they are in school, this bill would hold a forbearance on the accumulation of interest. Right now, the moment you take out the loan, you begin paying interest, or at least the interest is added to the principal of the loan. And there would be a forbearance. Also, for the life of me, I don't understand why the federal government would charge a fee, an origination fee on a loan. So we're going to eliminate the origination fees, which can be a couple $1,000s. And so that, once again, would lower the total cost of the loan. So what we want to do is to give students a chance, particularly the graduate students who have the greatest per person debt. Even if you want to be a teacher, you have to go to that 5th year to get the credential. And that probably results in a student loan. I was talking to a teacher that stopped by my office a couple of days last week, and they were talking about this and said, well, what about me as a teacher? And I said, why not? Why not allow you to refinance that federal loan that you took out so that you can become a teacher? And so they would be included also. So this piece of legislation will be introduced next week, and it will address one other very obnoxious and I think a very serious question about the entire student loan program. Right now, those loans with the 6%, 5%, 4%, even up to 8% interest rate, the government is borrowing money at less than 2%. Aha. So who's making the arbitrage profit here? Federal government, your government. How much money? It's calculated that a student that takes out a loan today, over the next 10 years, and all of those students that will do that, the federal government will earn, out of the pockets of the students, $138 billion of profit. $138 billion of profit on the backs of the student. Now, by going to 3.2% loan, we're not going to eliminate the profit, but at least we're going to eliminate the burden, or reduce the burden on the students. And the federal government ought not be profiting on the back of the students in any case. If we're borrowing at 2% and we have an administrative cost, that ought to be it, and that's exactly what this bill does. So for existing loans, that $1 trillion of existing loans, they would all be able to be refinanced. Student would go to the student aid office and say, I'm looking at $50,000 of student loans, federal government loans, I want to refinance them. They're at 5%, you can refinance them at 3.2%. And so it's up to the student. You like that 6% interest rate? Well, don't bother to refinance. But if you want a lower interest rate, then you would be able to apply for a lower interest rate. For new loans, we have representatives from the student aid office here. For new loans that are being taken out, all of those new loans would be at that lower rate. So going forward, all of the rates would be 3.2%. Not a bad thing to have happen. You want to grow the economy? We're counting on students in higher education being the foundation of economic growth, counting on the graduate students providing us with the research that's necessary for the economy to solve all kinds of problems. And I know we have some students here that are in epidemiology, some of them in etymology. Yeah, bugs are important. So we've got many different reasons to do this. We're going to need your help. If this is going to happen, we need to have those 40 million Americans that hold federal loans. We need to have them rise up and say, enough already. Let us refinance our loans. Let us have an interest rate that is similar to what the federal government's able to borrow. Let us be able to participate in the economy. Maybe it's $50 a month, maybe it's $100 a month, depending upon what your loans are. But whatever it is, it gives the student, the graduate student and the former student, an opportunity to get on with life, to get on with managing their finances in a way that will allow them to meet their dreams and their goals. So that's what it does.